Alright guys, welcome back to the garage. It's Thursday the 17th of June 2021 and we're just going to start the video off by showing you these panels out in the sun for the first time. So these are the ones that were done with the tinted base coat, with the pearl base coat, and they do look nice, but I don't think I like the blueness of it. So obviously you step back in the dark and that's going to kind of disappear a little bit, but that's the darker of the two stripes, I believe, so looks pretty nice in the sun. And I'll show you the other one, which is a little lighter. Excuse the thumbprints. So here's the second one in the sun. And just for comparison, let me see, I gotta flip this over now. So here's the pearl added directly to the clear coat, which is obviously a more silver stripe than the pearl added to the base coat. So I think we're going to go with the pearl added to the clear. I like that that look a little bit better. So I think we're going to go with that, just a little lighter than this stripe. There's the comparison. Alright, let's get to it. Alright guys, today's plan is to start working on the final wet sanding of the hood and the trunk lids, the top sides. If you've watched the previous videos, you'll know that the bottom sides have been painted already. So we're going to be concentrating now on finishing the top sides, and that will begin with wet sanding down to 600 grit. So we'll get these uncovered. We'll work on the bonnet first, which is the hardest of the two panels because of all the contours. Should be a little easier to paint the top side versus the bottom side. As I mentioned previously, all that structure in the bottom of the hood creates quite an issue when you are trying to paint. So we're looking forward to having a little bit easier time of it on the top side. Cross my fingers. So anyway, let's get that uncovered. We'll move it over to this side of the garage. We'll get our wet sanding setup going, and we'll spray it down with guide coat, and we'll begin to wet sand on this. Alright, so we've got the hood slash bonnet flipped over, and the first step now is to, we just wiped it down quickly with a microfiber towel just to get the dust off of it. And the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our guide coat. So we're going to guide coat, and then we are going to wet sand with a block with 600 wet sandpaper until all that guide coat is gone. We shouldn't have any issues now since the bodywork has been done on the previous stage and the previous stage to that. So we've done bodywork on two steps prior to this stage. So this is really the final sanding stage, and you shouldn't really come up with any issues here on your final blocking. So wish me luck. We should be good to go after this block out. If not, we're going to have to stop, and we're going to have to make some repairs and then go back to a priming stage with high build urethane primer in order to fix any problems that might arise. So we're hoping we don't have to go backwards in order to move forward. So wish me luck. Here we go. Alright, guide coat is applied and drying, and I should mention it's just not only to make sure you've got the panel smooth, which I'm hoping that it is, but it's also a good idea to spray the guide coat just to ensure that you've sanded all the areas on the actual panel before you go to base coat and clear coat. Otherwise you may see some sanding scratches that you missed. So good idea to add the guide coat in general. We got our bucket here with our paper soaking. So we've got 600 grit wet. We've got just clean water. Make sure your bucket is clean. Make sure there's no grains of anything in there. So I've gone inside, washed my bucket out, put water in, and put a drop of dish soap. I usually have a sponge in there just so I can squeeze some water. Some guys use a spray bottle to spray water on the panel. I just use a sponge and squeeze the water out when I'm sanding, because you want to keep the area wet where you're actually sanding. It has a drop of liquid dish detergent, so just a drop of Dawn in here just to help the sandpaper slide a little bit more and to keep the panel clean. So that's pretty much about it. We're ready to go. I think we're going to grab a little block and we're going to start sanding. So these are the blocks we're going to be using for wet sanding. So this is a hard block. just for the more flat areas. And then we've got a softer block when we get into the contour areas where we need a little bit of contour sanding, and we'll use a soft block. So again, as mentioned, never attempt to sand with your hand or your palm of your hand. You'll end up leaving finger marks in the primer, and that'll show up as a wave when you put your base and your clear coat on. Alright, I think we're ready to go, so we'll let the block sanding begin. Progress on the bonnet, seems to be blocking out pretty well. Once you wet it down with a garden hose, you can pretty much see if you've got any imperfections, and it's looking pretty good. That water provides a pretty good glossiness that you can sort of check your work. So I'm happy with that so far. So we're at the point now where we're going to probably switch to a soft block. We're starting to get towards the curvy bits, so we're going to switch to a softer block, and we'll start blocking out the outsides and the bubble and the eyebrows. Don't be afraid to change your paper out. It makes it a lot easier on yourself, and it creates a much better job in the end. So I know it hurts, but change your paper frequently and keep it clean. Alright guys, the bonnet is now wet sanded down to 600 grit, and it's looking good. Just rinsed it off with fresh water. Still needs to just sand the edges where we didn't paint body color before. Got a little bit of blue paint here to scuff off, but I think that's looking pretty good. You can kind of tell what it's going to look like with the clear on, and in my mind that looks pretty good. If we can get the clear to look like that, then we'll be happy. And then the bonnet stripe. Alright, we'll let this dry, and we will move on to the boot lid. That's looking good. Alright, up next is the boot lid, and we've got her flipped over and guide coated and ready to go. Did want to make one quick note on my process. I've changed from going with a 600 grit initially to a 400 grit wet, and then we're finishing with a 600 grit wet, as opposed to trying to knock this down initially with a 600. It's got a bit of an orange peel texture in it, so it was taking me a while to knock it down with the 600 grit. So what we decided to do is we'll block it out with the 400 grit, and then we'll go back and hand sand it with the 600 grit as a finish, and that seems to work out pretty well. So starting with 400, you can start with 600, it's just a lot more work, but I'm going to start with 600 and start with 400 wet, finish with 600 wet, and we should be good to go. Hopefully this one will block out as well as the bonnet did. Is now done, sanded down to 600 grit, and it's looking pretty good. From the water test, I think I got something going on right there where that little bit of guide coat still is. I think I've got a little small depression there, so I think we'll do a little bit of putty work there, but other than that it looks pretty good. So I think we're good to go on the boot lid, except for that little spot. Anyway, we'll let this dry up and we'll come back out and we'll take another look. Make sure everything still looks okay before we move on to fixing that one little spot. And then we're going to have to sand up the edges here. And then we're going to have to flip them back over and do the taping on the bottom so we don't get any overspray on the painted parts on the bottom. Not looking forward to that. Taping is definitely not my strong suit, nor do I enjoy it. Probably mentioned that a few hundred times. Anyway, we'll take a bit of a break and we'll get back out here after dinner. Alright guys, just coming up to 7 p.m. and we're all just doing a little bit of project planning and figuring out what we want to do for the next couple of days. So here is the plan. Tomorrow, being Friday, is not supposed to be a very good day weather-wise. It's supposed to be rainy and very high humidity pretty much all day tomorrow. So tomorrow is not going to be a painting day. Tomorrow will be more of a gather supply days. I need more medium reducer, and I need some other stuff like this spray gun, paint remover, can, some more sandpaper, etc., etc. So what I'll do tomorrow is I'll do a supply run, pick up what I need from a supply perspective for the next few days, and get ready to work on this on Saturday. One of the other things I can do tomorrow is probably try to install this instant mesh screen here on the side door to prevent some bugs coming in on Saturday when I do get around to laying my base coat on these two panels. One of the other things I can do tomorrow, being Friday and being a rainy day, is I can actually get the bottoms of these panels masked up. We need to do a little bit more sanding on the edges, probably just with a gray Scotch-Brite, just to roughen up the edges of this panel a little bit, and then we can proceed to tape off the bottoms and mask that so we don't get any overspray on it when we spray our base coat on Saturday. So that's another job for tomorrow. So the plan for Saturday then is to come out and spray our base coat probably by about noon, let's say. I may have to wait for the temperatures to come up and for the humidity to drop on Saturday. We'll see how things go. But I'd like to get everything sprayed out base coat wise, and it should be relatively quick to spray this in base coat, probably within an hour or so. So if I start at 12, I should be done by noon. Or if I start at 12, I should be done by 1. And then what the plan is to let that sit for the rest of the afternoon and evening, and then get out the following morning on Sunday and start by laying out our stripe on the bonnet here. And the reason I want to let the paint sit and dry is on my ghost stripe panels we had a little bit of problems with the masking tape and the panel not being quite dry enough. Apparently I have 24 hours to be able to do taping and clear on the base coat, so I should be good from a timing perspective if I just leave it overnight and come back the next day, do our taping. And I'm just going through again and organizing to make sure that I have the correct tape. So as mentioned previously, I need an 8 and a 10 millimeter tape, which is close enough to 5/16 and 3/8 are the two sizes of tape that I need. So we're good to go there. I did some measurements from this document, which is actually a Moss Motors document, I believe, that's been borrowed by SC Car Parts. And I've also done some measurements based off this, what I believe this is an original stripe. So it's telling me how far the stripe starts and comes back. What I moved this up to here actually, and I can see that that actually is the same distance that it's quoting here on this table for the fenders. So we're good to go there as far as the measurement is concerned. 5 7/8 inch is the start of the stripe up here on the bonnet, which will be up in this area somewhere, and that eventually will coincide with the side stripe. So if you're not familiar with the TR250, this stripe would actually go, it should go all the way up and all the way down here, and then obviously it will match up with the bonnet stripe. So that's going to be a little bit tricky to do the striping on the fenders. I believe what I'm going to have to do is install the hood on the car and get that positioned and gapped properly. And then what we're going to have to do is we are going to have to do a fitting of the front fenders to mark out physically where this bonnet stripe is going to interact here with the side of the fenders. I want to make sure that the alignment is correct. So we'll probably have to temporarily mount the side fenders in order to mark out where that stripe is going to be according to where the stripe is on the bonnet, if that makes sense, before we go ahead and base coat it. So by end of day Sunday, this panel should be complete. So Saturday will be base coat, Sunday will be stripe layout. It will also be the ghost pearl coat first, followed by the clear coat, 3 coats, and then the panel will be complete, and hopefully we'll be happy with the ghost stripe. If not, that's what sandpaper is for, but I'm hoping we can nail this on the first shot since I've had a couple of practice panels done. That's going to help me out greatly, I think, and successfully putting the stripe on. So as long as we can get it laid out properly, we should be good to go. Stay tuned.